The history of female leaders dates back to ancient times, with the earliest known instance being Queen Kubaba of Sumer. Born around 2500 BC, her story begins in the city of Kish, a key city-state in Sumer, present-day Iraq. She was a tavern keeper, a profession that was considered disreputable. Amidst the city's political unrest, her tavern became a sanctuary for dissidents, those who wished to kill the king. Using her tavern as a secret meeting point, the common folk alongside Kubaba started forming plans on how to overthrow the king and seize power. They brought silent social changes, elevating lower-class voices and shaping up a social revolution. The overthrowing night saw Kubaba, alongside other citizens, launching an assault against King's Guard, fiercely challenging the corrupt rulers. By the end of the night, their victory echoed across Sumer. Legitimized through public support, Kubaba ascended to the throne, becoming history's first recorded female ruler. The 4,000-year-old Sumerian king list describes her reign as a prosperous one, lasting for 100 years. The history of female leadership continues in ancient Egypt, where Hatshepsut's reign as pharaoh started in 1478 BC. Upon her husband's death, who by the way was also his half-brother, his son was appointed as the new pharaoh. However, he was a mere child, too young to rule. As a result, Hatshepsut assumed the role of regent, effectively ruling Egypt on her stepson's behalf. In the early years of her regency, Hatshepsut followed tradition. However, 7 years into her rule, Hatshepsut made an unprecedented move. She declared herself pharaoh, adopting all the symbols of a traditional male king, including the false beard and the kilt. This was a radical departure from tradition. While there had been female rulers in Egypt before, none had ever declared themselves pharaoh. Hatshepsut justified her claim to the throne by asserting that her father, Thutmose I, had made her his direct heir before his death. She also claimed that the god Amun himself had chosen her to be Egypt's ruler. As pharaoh, Hatshepsut initiated hundreds of building projects throughout Upper and Lower Egypt that far surpassed those of her predecessors, including her most notable project, the mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, a magnificent complex of terraces, ramps, and sanctuaries. One of her most famous expeditions was to the land of Punt, an area located on the northeast coast of Africa, rich in resources such as gold and ebony. Hatshepsut's reign, which lasted about 22 years, was one of peace and prosperity. She brought stability to Egypt, both internally and in its relations with foreign nations. Despite being a woman in a traditionally male role, she managed to maintain her power and authority, ruling as one of Egypt's most successful pharaohs. Meanwhile, in the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete, archaeological evidence suggests that women held significant power, possibly even as priestess queens. Continuing with one of the most well-known female leaders from ancient times across the globe, in ancient China, Wu Zetian, the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor, was born in 624 AD during the Tang dynasty. Her father, Wu Shihuo, was a successful merchant, and her mother was of noble descent. Wu Zetian's early life was marked by a keen intellect and a thirst for knowledge, unusual traits for a woman of her time. At the age of 14, she was selected to be a concubine for Emperor Taizong, a position that allowed her to live in the imperial palace, but offered little in terms of power or influence. Despite her lowly status, Wu Zetian was not going to be a simple pot plant in the emperor's court. She spent her time studying the classics and learning about the ins and outs of governance and politics. When Emperor Taizong died in 649 AD, Wu Zetian was supposed to spend the rest of her life in a Buddhist nunnery, as was customary for the concubines of deceased emperors. However, fate had other plans for her. Emperor Gaozong, Taizong's son and successor, recalled her to the palace to be his concubine. This was an unprecedented move, one that marked the beginning of Wu Zetian's meteoric rise to power. In the palace of Emperor Gaozong, Wu Zetian's influence grew rapidly. She was intelligent, charismatic, and politically skillful. The emperor suffered from an illness, which often left him unable to govern. Wu Zetian stepped into the void, gradually taking over the day-to-day running of the empire. In 655 AD, Wu Zetian gave birth to Gaozong's son, solidifying her position in the imperial court. She was promoted to the rank of Empress Consort, the highest position a woman could hold in the imperial hierarchy. However, this was not enough for Wu Zetian. She wanted more than to be a mere consort. She wanted to rule in her own right. Emperor Gaozong's health continued to fade, and by 660 AD, Wu Zetian was effectively in control of the Tang dynasty. She ruled through her sick husband, making all the important decisions and issuing orders in his name. When Emperor Gaozong died, Wu Zetian's power was solidified. She installed her youngest son, Li Xian, as the new emperor, but she retained the real power. Historians have often portrayed Wu Zetian as a ruthless and power-hungry ruler, eliminating potential rivals, including members of her own family, and establishing a secret police force to maintain control. In 690 AD, Wu Zetian took the unprecedented step of proclaiming herself emperor, founding her own dynasty, the Zhou. She was the first and only woman in Chinese history to hold this title. Wu Zetian's reign as emperor was marked by a series of reforms aimed at centralizing power and improving the lives of the common people. She reduced the power of the aristocracy, promoted government officials based on performance rather than birth, and implemented policies to improve agriculture and education. Towards the end of her reign, Wu Zetian faced numerous rebellions and plots against her. Her health began to decline, and in 704 AD, she was forced to give up the throne in favor of her son, who became Emperor Zhongzong. Wu Zetian died a year later in 705 AD, at the age of 81. Despite her controversial reign, Wu Zetian left a significant legacy. Her reforms had a lasting impact on Chinese society, and her reign remains a fascinating chapter in the annals of Chinese history. In the Americas, the Iroquois Confederacy, a powerful alliance of 6 Native American nations, recognized the political authority of women. Clan mothers selected and could depose chiefs, making them key decision-makers within their communities. This early example of structural female leadership and others like it laid the groundwork for the rise of powerful women in the centuries to come. As we move into the Middle Ages, we find more examples of female leaders who left incredible marks on history. Jeanne d'Arc, better known as Joan of Arc, was born in 1412 in a small village in northeastern France. Born into a peasant family, her life took a dramatic turn when she began experiencing visions at the age of 12. These visions, which she believed were sent by saints and angels, urged her to lead France to victory in its long-running war with England, known as the 100 Years' War. At the age of 17, Joan convinced Charles VII, the Dauphin of France, of her divine mission. Despite her young age and lack of military experience, she was given command of an army. With her at the helm, the French forces lifted the siege of Orleans, a decisive moment that marked a turning point in the war. Joan continued her military campaigns, aiming to expel the English from France completely. However, her fortunes took a turn for the worse in 1430, when she was captured at Compiègne by the Burgundians, allies of the English. Sold to the highest bidder, Joan ended up in the hands of the English, who were eager to eliminate the symbol of French resistance. Joan was put on trial for heresy in 1431. Joan's visions, her wearing of men's clothing, and her challenge to Christian church authority were among the charges brought against her. Despite facing a hostile court, Joan defended herself with remarkable intelligence and courage. Her responses demonstrated her deep faith and unwavering belief in her divine mission. However, the outcome of the trial was predetermined. Joan was found guilty and sentenced to death. On May 30th, 1431, Joan of Arc was executed by burning at the stake in the market square of Rouen, a spectacle witnessed by a large crowd. She was only 19 years old. Her death marked the end of a brief but extraordinary life, one that had seen a young peasant girl rise to command armies and influence the course of a nation's history. However, Joan's story did not end with her death. In the decades that followed, her reputation underwent a dramatic transformation. 25 years after her death, a retrial ordered by the Pope freed Joan of all charges, declaring her a martyr. This marked the beginning of Joan's rehabilitation in the eyes of the public and the Church, thus emerging from the ashes of her execution pyre as a symbol of resistance, faith, and heroism. In Africa, Queen Amina of Zazau, also known as Amina Sarauniya Zazau, was a legendary warrior queen of the city-state Zazau in what is now northwestern Nigeria. Born around 1533, she was the middle child among her siblings. From a young age, Amina displayed an unusual interest in the political and military strategies of her grandfather and her father. She attended state meetings, and by the age of 16, she had earned the respect of the Zazau military and had distinguished herself as a leading warrior in her father's cavalry. Her remarkable military skills and political wisdom led to her appointment as the Magajia, or next in line to her mother's throne. Upon the death of her mother, Amina, however, did not immediately claim her right to rule. She served loyally under her brother's reign for a decade instead, honing her military skills and gaining the respect and loyalty of the Zazau warriors. 15 years later, following her brother's death, Amina ascended to the throne and became the Queen of Zazau. She was around 43 years old at the time. Known for her strategic military mind and her commitment to expanding Zazau's influence, Queen Amina led her first military campaign just a few months after her coronation. Her military campaigns were not merely for territorial expansion, but also aimed at securing trade routes. The kingdom was strategically located at the crossroads of three major trade corridors in Africa. By securing these routes, Amina ensured the economic prosperity of her kingdom. Amina's military campaigns were highly successful, and over the course of her 34-year reign, she expanded the territory of Zazao to its largest size ever. Her military strategies were innovative and effective, introducing the use of metal armor, including iron helmets and chainmail, to protect her soldiers during battles. The queen was also known for her practice of building fortified walls around conquered cities, a tradition that later became common in the region. These walls, known as Ganuwar Amina or Amina's walls, served as defensive structures and were often constructed immediately after a territory was conquered. The most famous of these is the Zaria Wall, which still stands today in modern Nigeria. Queen Amina's reign was not only marked by military conquests, but also by significant administrative reforms. She established a system of government with clearly defined responsibilities and roles for her officials, allowing for efficient administration of her vast kingdom. She also encouraged trade by introducing taxes for the goods entering her kingdom, which significantly boosted Zazao's economy. Amina's reign is often described as a golden age of economic prosperity and military might in the history of the Zazao kingdom. Despite her successes, Queen Amina's reign was not without challenges. She faced numerous rebellions and uprisings, but her leadership style, combining military strength with administrative efficiency, ensured the stability and prosperity of Zazao throughout her reign. And the most shocking part about her life is her private life, which was marked by tragedy and loneliness. According to folklore, she never married or had children. Instead, she took a temporary husband from the legions of vanquished foes after each battle. However, in the morning following their wedding night, the husband would be executed. This was done to prevent any man from laying claim to the queen's wealth, power, or the throne. Queen Amina died in 1610 during a military campaign. Some accounts suggest she died in battle, while others propose she was assassinated. In the centuries following her death, Queen Amina's life and reign have been the subject of numerous songs, oral histories, and legends. Today, she is celebrated as a national hero in Nigeria, being definitely one of the most iconic figures in African history. As we transition into the Renaissance and early modern period, female leadership continued to evolve. In England, Queen Elizabeth I, 1533 to 1603, reigned for 44 years, a period known as the Elizabethan era. Elizabeth's early life was filled with uncertainty and danger. When she was just 2.5 years old, her mother was beheaded on charges of adultery and treason. Following the execution, Elizabeth was declared illegitimate and stripped of her place in the line of succession. Despite this, her father continued to provide for her education, ensuring she received an education equal to that of any prince. This included lessons in languages, scripture, rhetoric, history, and philosophy, laying the foundation for her future reign as queen. Elizabeth's position in the royal family changed dramatically with the death of her father, whose will reinstated Elizabeth and her sister Mary to the line of succession after their half-brother. Upon the death of their half-brother, Mary ascended to the throne, becoming England's first queen regnant. A few years later, Elizabeth partook in an uprising against Mary's marriage. Although there was no evidence against Elizabeth, she was imprisoned in the Tower of London for a whole year, followed by a house arrest. Elizabeth used this time to further her education and prepare for the possibility of ruling England. In 1558, Mary died without an heir, leaving the throne to Elizabeth, who was proclaimed Queen of England, marking the beginning of a new era. Elizabeth's reign began amidst great turmoil. She was determined to rule without the influence of a husband or council, and England was in a state of religious unrest, and the country's economy was in shambles. She re-established the Church of England and introduced a new Book of Common Prayer, a move that helped to stabilize the country and solidify her power. This era of peace and prosperity allowed England to flourish culturally and economically. Elizabeth's reign also marked a golden age in English literature, seeing the rise of William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. Despite pressure to marry and secure the succession, Elizabeth famously remained unmarried and childless, earning her the nickname the Virgin Queen. Her decision to remain single was a political strategy that allowed her to maintain control over her kingdom and her destiny. She skillfully used the prospect of marriage as a diplomatic tool in negotiations, keeping potential suitors and foreign powers at bay. Elizabeth's reign ended with her death on March 24, 1603. In the Ottoman Empire, Hürrem Sultan, also known as Roxolana, was a powerful and influential consultant to Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. In Africa, Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, in present-day Angola, fought against the Portuguese and their expanding slave trade in Central Africa. In Russia, Catherine the Great, born as Sophia Augusta Frederica, was not of Russian descent but was chosen for Peter III, the heir to the Russian throne, for political reasons. They married in 1745 when she was only 16 years old. Catherine, a quick learner, swiftly adopted the Russian Orthodox faith, changed her name, and fully immersed herself in the Russian culture, winning the hearts of the Russian people. Despite her efforts, her marriage to Peter III was unhappy and largely loveless. In 1762, a coup d'état removed Peter III from the throne, and Catherine, who had gained the loyalty of the military and court, was declared the sole ruler of Russia. Her reign, which lasted until her death in 1796, is often considered the golden age of the Russian Empire. Catherine the Great's reign was marked by vast territorial expansion, modernization, and a desire to westernize Russia. She was a fan of the arts, literature, and education, establishing the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls, the first state-financed higher education institution for women in Europe. She commissioned a legal code that advocated for the equality of all men in the eyes of the law and proposed the creation of a constitution. However, these reforms were met with resistance and were never fully implemented. Catherine's personal life was as dynamic as her political career. She had a series of lovers, often elevating them to high positions for as long as they held her favor. The most famous of these was Grigory Potemkin, a military leader, statesman, and her rumored secret husband. Their relationship was a powerful alliance. Potemkin helped Catherine in her political doings and was instrumental in the annexation of Crimea. Despite her personal relationships, Catherine never allowed her lovers to interfere with her political decisions. She was a woman who wielded her power with an iron fist, never allowing her personal life to overshadow her role as the Empress of Russia. Catherine the Great's reign came to an end with her death on November 17, 1796. She left behind a legacy of immense expansion and modernization. Under her rule, Russia grew larger and stronger, becoming recognized as one of the great powers of Europe. As we enter the 19th century, we see the emergence of women leaders in the political arena. In Britain, Queen Victoria reigned for over 63 years, the longest of any of her predecessors. Her reign, known as the Victorian era, was a period of industrial, cultural, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom. The 21st century has seen an unprecedented rise in the number of female leaders worldwide, with the most famous being Germany's Angela Merkel, who has served as chancellor since 2005. Her journey to the pinnacle of German politics began in East Germany, where she grew up. Her father, a Lutheran pastor, moved the family to Templin, a small town in East Germany, when Merkel was just a few weeks old. Merkel's early life was marked by academic excellence, especially in the fields of physics and mathematics. In 1989, the year the Berlin Wall fell, Merkel became involved in the democratic movement, joining the newly formed Democratic Awakening Party. This marked her entry into politics, a field she would come to dominate in the coming decades. Merkel's political career took off rapidly, and by 1990, she was serving as the Minister for Women and Youth in the government of Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Merkel's rise in politics was meteoric. In 1991, she was appointed as the Minister for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety. Merkel's leadership skills were put to the test in 2000, when a funding scandal rocked the CDU. Despite the crisis, Merkel managed to steer the party, demonstrating her resilience and strategic thinking. In 2005, Merkel achieved a historic milestone by becoming Germany's first female chancellor. She navigated numerous crises, including the global financial crisis of 2008 and the Eurozone crisis that followed, earning her the nickname, the world's most powerful woman. During her time as chancellor, Merkel was known for her pragmatic and cautious approach to politics. She often waited to see how situations would develop before making decisions, a trait that earned her the nickname Mutti, or Mother, among the German public. Merkel's leadership style was characterized by a focus on consensus and compromise, both within Germany and on the international stage. In 2015, Merkel made another significant decision when she decided to open Germany's borders to refugees fleeing conflict in the Middle East. This decision was controversial, but Merkel stood by it, famously declaring, "Wir schaffen das," or "We can do this." This phrase came to define her approach to the refugee crisis and demonstrated her commitment to humanitarian values. Throughout her tenure, Merkel was a stalwart supporter of the European Union, often acting as a mediator in disputes between member states. Her leadership was instrumental in navigating the Eurozone crisis and in maintaining the stability of the EU during challenging times. Merkel's tenure as chancellor was not without its challenges. Her decision to open Germany's borders during the refugee crisis was met with significant backlash, both domestically and internationally. Despite this, Merkel stood firm in her decision, demonstrating her commitment to humanitarian values. In 2017, Merkel was re-elected for a fourth term as chancellor, but announced that it would be her last. During her final term, she continued to navigate complex issues, including Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite these challenges, Merkel remained a steady hand at the helm of German politics. Merkel stepped down as chancellor in 2021, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, pragmatism, and commitment to the values of democracy and humanitarianism. Her impact on German politics and on the global stage is undeniable, marking her as one of the most influential figures of the 21st century. In Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen became the first woman to be elected as president in 2016. In Africa, Sahle-Work Zewde became the first female president of Ethiopia in 2018, while in Europe, Ursula von der Leyen became the first woman to serve as president of the European Commission in 2019. In the United States, Kamala Harris made history in 2021 by becoming the first female vice president in U.S. history. These women are not just symbols of progress, they are active agents of change, shaping the world through their leadership. Do what you will with this information.